Hey everybody, I'm Chef Tom with atbbq.com, and today we're making wood-fired clams with fresh pasta. We're gonna kick this off by making a fresh pasta, and it's a really simple fresh pasta. It's semolina flour, some all-purpose flour, and water, and that's it. It's about as simple as pasta gets. Now this is a slightly denser pasta, which is actually gonna add some texture and some chew to the finished dish. Let's jump right in. All right, so this semolina flour is really common when it comes to making pasta. It's a little bit more yellow than a typical flour. It's got a little bit more coarse feel to it. And this is another one of those products that we're bringing in from Italy to go with our wood-fired cooking, along with like the double-aught flour, the olive oil, the balsamic. It's a really quality flour. And we're going with 3/4 of a cup of each one of these, an all-purpose flour and the semolina flour. Now I'm just gonna give this a quick whisk to incorporate the flours and make sure that there aren't any lumps. And we'll turn it right out onto the work surface. All right, from here we're just gonna create a well in the center. And this is where we're gonna add the water. Bring this around so it's a little bit more even. And we're adding probably about 10 tablespoons of water total today, but we'll start with a half cup and leave a little back. You can always change a little bit depending on the humidity, depending on the day. But what we're gonna do is just start to mix this flour, taking from the edges, mixing it into the water in the middle of the well. Very simple, a little bit at a time. It's gonna turn from a liquid into a paste, from a paste into a dough. And now typically what I'll do is when I get this to the point where it's starting to hold together, I'm gonna grab my bench knife or dough scraper to start to chop the rest in. All right, so at this point you can see it's looking pretty dry. As we gather this together, there's gonna be a lot of dry stuff left on the table, and that's all right. We're gonna work some of that in as we need this, but I think we could go ahead and add a little bit more water. And we're just gonna start to gather this up and press it together and begin to knead it. All right, now this is where you're gonna put some work in. You're gonna need to do this for probably about 10 to 15 minutes before you get a smooth dough that's formed. This is certainly a labor of love, but worth it in the end. So what we're doing when we knead the dough is we're just taking it and folding it back over on itself and pressing it. And as we do that, we're agitating the flour and the gluten, and that's what it takes to form that gluten, so that you have this nice stretchy dough that's gonna hold together when we roll it out. You need moisture and you need agitation to activate that gluten. All right, so we're right around 5 minutes of kneading at this point. You can see we're getting smooth, but it's not quite smooth yet. We're just gonna keep on working it. And what we do, fold, press, turn, fold, press, turn. Keep at it. All right, here is 10 minutes in. You can see how it's really smoothing out. We're just about to the point where we can let this rest, let the gluten relax before we form it into our shapes. So here we feel the gluten has been significantly worked. We've got a smooth surface, and at this point, we're gonna let it relax. All right, so cover it up with some plastic wrap. Just let it sit there at room temperature for about half an hour. Now we're gonna get to preparing the clams, and we're gonna start by soaking them in some cool water. So here we have 2 pounds of little neck clams. Just gonna place these in a bowl. And you want to make sure that your clams are closed. If you get a hold of one and it's open a little bit, just give it a tap on the shell. It should close if it's still alive. If it's not and it stays open, you want to toss it. So let's start with a quick rinse. We'll get some of the stuff off the outside. And just look at how murky that water is just from rinsing them off. We're going to get rid of that before we soak. So at this point, just cover them completely with some cool water. And you'll want to let them sit in here for about 20 minutes before you come back to them. And what's going to happen during that time is these clams are going to be pumping that water through, filtering it, and the sand is going to come out of the clam, so you're not going to have a sandy clam in the end. I want to show you guys what gets filtered out when we soak these clams. So we'll just start by taking these clams out so I can show you what's left behind. And you can see how the water's kind of murky. And then as we get to the bottom, you'll see some sand settled down there as well. So all of this gritty stuff, now we're not going to have to worry about that being in our food. All right, give the bowl a rinse and do another soak on the clam. Today we're cooking on the Clementi Wood-Fired Oven. Although you could do this recipe on just about any cooker, whatever you're using at home, I'm sure that you can pull it off, whether it's a Weber kettle, could be a Kamado Joe ceramic grill, Yoder Smoker's pellet grill, any of those will work. Even a gas grill would work. But we really want to show off the versatility of these wood-fired ovens. They're not made just for pizzas. I'm just going to slide a couple of fire starters in here to help get this fire going. And then we'll kind of do this pyramid cross pattern. Let the air flow in between. This should build us a fire pretty quickly. Light it up with the torch. And we'll just let this fire get going while we prepare the pasta. Now we're going to get into making our fresh pasta. What we're working with today, as you know, is a semolina and water pasta. So this is a little bit denser, a little bit more sturdy than, say, a pasta that's made with eggs in it, which might be a little bit more velvety. Now those pastas lend themselves well to being rolled out flat and cut into shapes like fettuccine or ravioli, all kinds of stuff. But what we're going to do today is something that holds up better to a sturdier, denser pasta. And that's a hand-formed shape that's really easy to do called cavatelli. We're looking to get about 8 ounces of pasta in this dish today. All right, so 8.5, that'll leave us a little bit for the ends that we're gonna throw away. The rest of this I'm just gonna set aside for another use. And the stuff that we're using today, I'm gonna keep wrapped unless I'm working it at the moment. So we'll start off with this strip here. And what we wanna do is roll this out into sort of a pencil shape. So I'm just gonna form this into a rod. And then using both hands, we'll start to roll this out pencil thick. And this pasta has a really velvety texture right now, which is awesome. It means that we really worked it to just the right doneness. Now when we get this to where we want it, I'm just going to slice it right in the middle. Turn this around and even these off. And we're going to cut roughly 1/2 to 3/4 inch sections. And then to form the cavatelli, you're going to place that down there, press down with your thumb and push away from you. So you form this divot and roll it away. Now it's got this nice crevice to hold sauce. So again, we're just pushing down and away, Form that crevice and roll. And then with a little bit of practice, you can speed yourself up. Go 2 at a time. So with the wood cooking down into coals, we just move the fire off the center of the deck all the way off to the side so it's contained there. We can continue to feed it logs so it's got the flame coming over the top, but now the deck is super hot as well. Now it's time to prep the aromatics and the other items that are going to go in the skillet with the clams when we cook them, and this is what's going to really build the flavor of our broth. We're going to start off with some shallots. So get rid of the skin. And then we'll just put a slice on these. Doesn't have to be terribly thin. That skillet's going to be hot, so we don't want to scorch these. And by cutting them a little bit wider, they'll hold up a little bit better. So just a couple ounces there. That's probably what, like half a cup or so. Next, we've got some garlic. I'm going to crush this down and give it a rough chop. Next, we've got about 6 ounces of pancetta, which is like an Italian bacon. We're going to cut this into lardons. This is one of the things that's going to add saltiness to our dish. If you don't have access to pancetta, you can use bacon in its place, although most delis now carry pancetta. I just ask for them to slice it as thick as they can so that I can break it down in the shape that I want. All right, aromatics are prepped. We're gonna slide our skillet into the oven to preheat and go cook off the pasta. So get your water boiling, and you want to make sure that you get plenty of salt in there. Remember, there's no salt in the pasta, so this is where the salt's going to come from. And then add your fresh pasta to the boiling water. And give it a stir to make sure stuff's not sticking together, and set a timer for 8 minutes. All right, so here we are 8 minutes in. You still have a little bit of chew to them, which is fine because they're going to cook in the oven with the clams as well. And these are pretty starchy, so we're going to add a little bit of olive oil to make sure that they don't stick. All right, let's head to the oven. All right, so here's the preheated skillet. We're going to put down a little bit of olive oil. Smoking, so that tells me it's nice and hot. And then in with our pancetta and our shallots. We want to let this pancetta render down a bit and these shallots brown up. We're going to throw this back on the deck and close the door, but we will be stirring fairly frequently just to make sure that nothing is scorching. Now, if you're not cooking in a wood-fired oven, say just on a regular grill, what you want to do is set it up for indirect heat. You don't want your skillet directly over the flame because you don't want the flame to scorch what's in the skillet. But you do want high heat, say like 500 degrees, and you're going to close the lid so that you create an oven space. All right, so we're getting some nice browning on the pancetta as well as the shallots. And if you get in here, you can see just how much fat has been rendered out. That's going to be great for the flavor of this dish. We'll give this just a minute longer before we move on. All right, next we're going to add our garlic. And it won't take long for that to become aromatic, at which point we're going to add a little bit of white wine. So let's add about a half cup of white wine. Throw this back on the deck to reduce down a bit. All right, our wine's reduced down now. It's time to add in the clams. All right, we're gonna place these in here with a little bit of cooking liquid as well. This is a half cup of the water from the pasta, so it's got a little starch in it to help thicken things up. And we'll do about a quarter cup of vegetable stock. And then some Plowboy's Fin and Feather. So this is gonna brighten things up with some citrus and some rosemary, some salt and sugar. And we wanna cook these until the clams pop open. So let's get them back on the deck and put the oven door back in place. So once these have popped open, and you can literally watch them pop open, they're fully cooked, they're ready to eat, but we are going to finish this off by adding our pasta back to it. We've got a couple that haven't opened yet. We'll give those a couple more minutes to do so, because at this point it's only been about 6-7 minutes. All right, so let's put our pasta back in here. It's gonna continue to cook. It's gonna add some starch to the dish. And now that these are open, they can really soak up some of that broth. So let's give this just a couple more minutes. All right, well, these are looking good, and it looks like all of our clams have popped open now, which is great. But of course, if you do have one that doesn't pop open, just pick it out of there and throw it away. You don't want to risk eating one that's already dead. Now it's just finishing touches. We're gonna add a little bit of fresh lemon juice, some freshly grated Parmesan, and a little bit of basil. Parmesan should melt right into this hot broth that we've created in the bottom here. Add a little bit of saltiness and a little bit of funkiness. And then brighten it up with some fresh basil, which also just looks beautiful on top. You're gonna wanna have some baguette on hand because all of this great liquid in here. But what you wanna do is just dig a little bit of meat out of that clam. Grab yourself some pasta. Just incredible. The textures are fantastic. The pasta almost mimics the texture of the clam, even in shape, which I really love about this recipe. And the broth is salty and rich, which is really impressive considering how short a time that broth actually has to develop. Like I said, grab yourself a baguette. Soak up all of that. And I know there's some of you out there that just aren't going to make the fresh pasta, and I get that. It's time consuming, it's labor intensive. If you're gonna do this with a dried pasta, linguine and clams is a classic. It's gonna change the texture of the dish, but it'll still be really delicious. Just make sure you don't overcook your linguine before you get it into the skillet with the clams, because it's thinner, it's gonna cook faster. Either way, I really hope you guys will give this one a shot. It's a fantastic recipe that's really good any time of year. Thanks so much for watching. Be sure to check out atbbq.com for all of the products featured in today's video, including the new ATBBQ New Era Snapback hats. I'll throw a link in the description down below. If you enjoyed the video, please hit that subscribe button. And if you have any questions or comments, let me know in the comment section down below. And hey, let's be good to one another. For more recipes, tips, and techniques, head over to thesauce.atbbq.com. All things barbecue, where barbecue legends are made.